Welcome back, everyone, to Bridging the Gap. Today, we have a really exciting guest to have on. As we all know, in New Jersey right now, where energy is one of our largest issues here in the state, we're really starting to see a lot of this thing called AI boom. It was started off under the previous administration, under Governor Phil Murphy, in his second state of the state, talking about how New Jersey is going to become the AI center of the country. And now it's been raising a lot of questions in communities throughout the state about how power is used, how energy is used, how much water, open land, farms, in the most densely populated state in the country. All these are pretty valid questions to ask. And today we wanted to do a question and answer and kind of get to the truth of kind of what a lot of what we're seeing on these AI issues and what AI really is and what a data center really is. So tonight we have on Bryce Chinault from the Abundance Institute. Bryce, thank you for joining us. Kicking it off, love for you to tell some of our listeners just a little bit about yourself.
Sure, happy to. It's an honor to be here with you on your program, and hopefully I'll get to join you again in the future. So thanks for having me. I grew up in Cambridge, Wisconsin, a no stoplight town. I played on the football team, the basketball team, and all that good stuff growing up. I attended university and graduated from the University of Wisconsin Whitewater, studying political science. Then I spent a decade out in Washington, D.C., because, what do you do with a political science degree? I was like, I don't know, I'll go out to Washington, D.C. and figure it out. I started at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, do a bunch of economic policy research there, and I started on the state government affairs team. And then the George Washington University Regulatory Studies Center, where we did nerdy benefit cost analysis of federal proposed rules. I also received my Master of Public Policy degree from George Mason University. And I've spent the past year as the Director of State Government Affairs for the Abundance Institute, where we work on tech, AI, and energy policy, hot topics, you might say. And in a nutshell, at the Abundance Institute, we're optimists when it comes to technological advancements like AI. And we have a build what works mindset when it comes to energy generation. We see an abundance of tech and energy as a benefit to you and me. And I currently live in my wife's hometown of Newtown, Connecticut. We're raising our three young kids.
Awesome.
Nice. So I know one of the big issues right now in the nation, especially here in New Jersey, are data centers. So Bryce, what would you consider a data center? And I guess what do they typically look like?
Sure. Yeah, good question. I think of data centers as computers that you don't touch. They're the servers running in the background, powering everything we do online. My colleague Neil Chilson was just on C-SPAN, and he referred to them as what they really are, supercomputers. They are the physical infrastructure behind the internet and modern computing. Every time you stream Netflix, store photos in the cloud, use online banking, or interact with AI tools, you're relying on servers housed in data centers. A data center can come in various shapes and forms, but you would probably think of it as, some sort of industrial building as you pass by one. The inside of a data center is filled with racks and racks and racks of servers and wires and all kinds of electronic equipment. And importantly, they're not, just AI buildings. They support hospitals, financial systems, logistics, emergency services, cloud storage, small businesses, increasingly almost every part of modern life.
Nice. So what would you say? I know there's a lot of negative perception on what data centers are. What would you say are some misconceptions on them?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. One misconception would be that they don't create any sort of value locally, that they're just resource hogs that don't, bring anything back in return. In reality, they can generate enormous property tax revenues. They can lead to infrastructure investments that are long overdue. They create a lot of construction employment. A single data center in a town that never recovered from a manufacturing plant that left, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they could see their fortunes shift very quickly as part of the data center boom we currently find ourselves in. And another misconception, that I think of is that everyone seems to think that they're brand new. But if you look into the history of so-called data centers, you'll find that the first one we built was back in the 1940s. With a notable build out of them starting, back in the 90s or so when the internet started to permeate, and now here again in the age of AI. And to be sure, today's version of a data center or a supercomputer is a lot different than those from 80 years ago. But for instance, there's an old AOL building. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember America Online and dial-up internet, but probably plenty of your listeners are. And there's an old AOL building in Loudoun County, Virginia, that's now a modern data center. Many of your listeners have probably passed by a data center countless times without even knowing it. Again, they run in the background. They are what we think of as the cloud, where we store our family photos.
Awesome. Well, we wanted to do this episode because, well, one, it's a hot topic, but also I love to go on Facebook, or as one of our mayors at Jersey First to call it coloring book, because that's sometimes what it's like to deal with people on there. Yeah. And we wanted to put together an episode on some of the myth and facts and myths of like some of these things. So I went in Facebook comment section, and that's what I did a lot of my research on, of what are all these questions that people are saying and what they really want to know about these. So Bryce, I want to start off a little bit on the electricity side of things. New Jersey, we have our utility bills have gone up over a couple 100% over the past year. I know that my parents pay literally, I think it's $600 per month in electricity bills. Yeah. And so I know plenty of people, and we don't have a big house. It's just 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And so New Jersey is one of the most expensive states in the country. And if that's something we can help, contain within our grid as much as we can, because our grid's PJM, it goes from Jersey to Chicago and then all the way down North Carolina and everywhere in between. So yep. A lot of people are worried about their electricity rates as a whole. Like, what would you say that really kind of the effect that AI data centers could have on the electricity grids?
Sure. As a resident of Connecticut, I am routinely, top in the country for electricity bills. It's us in California, although we don't quite compete with Hawaii. I feel bad for the folks out there, but yeah, energy bills suck. And like everything that uses electricity, data centers, they create demand on the electrical grid. Depending on any number of factors that go into the equation that could result in, say, like a local blackout or your energy bill increasing, they could play a role in them. But it would be way too simple to say, data center gets built in your area, you're going to end up with this negative outcome. And in fact, the opposite may be the case. So again, so like details will matter, but let's, just big picture here. I just mentioned Loudoun County, Virginia. They have the highest density of data centers in the country. It's like 1 out of 4 in the US data centers are located there. And it's actually the highest concentration of them in the world. So if it were to be simply the case that building them caused energy problems, Loudoun County residents would easily be paying the highest electric bills in the nation, and they'd be lucky to turn the lights on. But in reality, their prices are right on the national average, and electricity runs through homes just fine there. Where we see high energy costs is largely in states that have not been building energy capacity. The Department of Energy Secretary Chris Wright, who's going to be a speaker at our Operation Gigawatt Summit here in Utah, where I am now, he's noted this very observation. Where we've seen energy demand growth is where we've actually seen prices rise slowest. When I was getting ready for our conversation, I went and there's this study. It was done in 2020, so a little dated. There's other updated ones, but I just thought this put things in a good context. And it was assessing from 2010 to 2018. During that time period, there was an overall 6% increase in energy use, while global data center compute instances increased by 550% over that same time period. So a massive increase, right? In just say AI usage as a specific from people who demanded it, right? These are things that people are asking for and wanting, but it didn't result in a large scale energy use increase. Obviously an increase, but it was, the scale is much different. People talk about the amount of energy used for, say, like a prompt to a chat GPT, a Claude, or whatever you might be using. And one prompt is equal to something like watching Netflix for less than 9 seconds. Because I don't think we should get into the mindset that you limit your ability to stream a show just because it uses energy. I think that's a bad route for us to go with energy policy for data centers or anything else for that matter. Energy policy, supply and demand, local infrastructure, weather, international trade. These are what shape blackouts and price spikes, and whether or not a data center is built is pretty far down on that list.
Nice. So, for New Jersey, for example, I mean, how would you suggest that New Jersey sort of, structures and approves new power capabilities such as data centers?
Yeah, I think I would come at it from like a mindset perspective. you should think about demand for energy and energy generation itself as a sign of prosperity. There are no wealthy countries that use a small amount of energy, and there are no impoverished countries that use a large amount of energy. If you have a chart, right, with GDP per capita on one axis and energy use per capita on the other, it looks like a linear function. It's an arrow moving up and to the right. Energy and prosperity go hand in hand. So go at it with the approach of, how do I best expand this energy pie, not think about how to allocate the existing one.
Awesome. Well, nuclear energy is big in New Jersey, which is weird to say, but I think it's 42. I can't remember if it's 42 or 46% of our energy produced in the state is nuclear. Ooh. We have some of the few. I'm very proud of that. Most of our energy production, nuclear, is down south. What role do you think that nuclear energy could be played here, whether it's SMRs or microgrids or anything of the sort, in production for in complementary actions, I guess, with data centers?
Yeah, I am really bullish on the future of nuclear energy. I think it has the potential to power a massive increase in available electrons on the grid and a reduction in electricity bills over time. I think the data center industry and the wave of new nuclear technology being developed actually has the opportunity to benefit each other as industries, but then us as end users at the end of the day as well. On the nuclear point, to me, it's all about density. Comparing, say, solar and nuclear energy and density is mind-boggling. For what, like a 1 gigawatt nuclear plant, you'd need millions of solar panels and tens of thousands of acres of land to generate the same amount of electricity. Nuclear is also incredibly stable and reliable, mostly 24/7. So, and I think both actually have their important role to play, but like nuclear provides so much more with less. And nuclear waste concerns, although very real and important, are not the hurdles that critics seem to think it is. A topic that we'll be diving in more with our Operation Gigawatt Summit with Governor Cox here in Utah.
Awesome. Tyler, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the water usage, because I know that was a concern for some of your residents.
Yeah, I know. Just from talking to people around New Jersey, especially in Sussex County where we live, there's a lot of concerns of the water usage. What's going to happen with our fresh water sources. I mean, what would you say are some of the biggest myths about how this affects our fresh water?
Yeah, so I'd start with, currently, yes, data centers use water. They can even use a lot of water. And I don't want to gloss over that, or, anyone that has concerns about that, I don't want to dismiss them outright. And water is primarily used as a coolant to keep the electronic equipment from overheating, just the same as like why you and we sweat when we go for a jog, or why it's much colder to jump in water that's 40 degrees versus standing outside on a 40-degree day. But this water usage is largely void of context and viewed as some sort of anomaly, which it really isn't. Like there was a topic line I feel like I see a lot is an AI prompt uses a bottle of water, or something like that. And the amount of water used by an AI prompt is going to vary based on a number of factors. And a big part of this, it seems to get glossed over a lot, is it's about how the energy is generated and whether you count that against the use of AI or instead an energy generation question. More water is used in energy generation for AI than like the use of it at a data center. I went and found some numbers for you. So these, just put things in context. 300 ChatGPT searches, for instance, is supposed to be about equivalent to about a gallon of water, which is, is that a lot or a little? I don't know. Is it good or bad? People could have a debate on that. But the creation of one hamburger on your grill requires about 660 gallons of water. The pair of blue jeans you got in your dresser took about 2,866 gallons of water. A smartphone takes over 3,000 gallons. It takes water to build much of what you and I enjoy today. My colleagues looked at the numbers a few months back, and based on all the publicly available data we had, if we were to triple the amount of data centers, so if there were 3 times as many tomorrow as there are today, they would still consume, it's less than 10% of the water used at golf courses, 10% of the water used by aluminum manufacturers, something in the ballpark of, it was like 1% of the water used on corn. I'm a Wisconsinite. I love corn, but a significant portion of corn is used in ethanol production, which is, it's not going to barbecues or animal feed. It's just being used in I find, very inefficient and ineffective process for ethanol. We should be more uproarious about that. We could use Utah as an example here, since that's where I'm at. And there's been a lot of headlines here about a proposed data center in Box Elder. And one concern is this water use. And again, to put things in context here locally, agriculture consumes like 80% of Utah's developed water supply. And alfalfa is one of the most water intensive crops grown in the state. Alfalfa is great, feeds livestock. Great, wonderful. But it also uses it's like 1 to 2 million gallons of water per acre annually. And Utah's got like 500,000 acres dedicated to it. So hundreds of billions of gallons of water is used every year. And a good portion of that is exported internationally. I feel like I see different estimates, but it might be around 20%. It seems to vary a little bit. But it's going to like countries in the Middle East and Asia, like Saudi Arabia. And so Utah is effectively exporting large quantities of embedded water overseas through agricultural exports. Should we be up in arms about that? Maybe. Water matters, obviously, in a dry state. But it's interesting that one proposed data center could generate millions in local property tax revenue and major investment can become a lightning rod for criticism when other things like golf courses, leaking water infrastructure, or extremely water-intensive agriculture that already exists at massive scale just don't. My colleague Neil on C-SPAN the other day, he mentioned that almonds use 1,600 times more water than all the data centers in the US. So everybody drinking almond milk trying to save the planet are using a lot more water than everyone that's using all of the AI. And again, it's not that agriculture is bad in any way. I've planted tobacco and harvested corn. I don't want these things to go away, but it's just that we should put the water use in context.
No, certainly. And I think that a lot of the times people are like, oh my gosh, it's going to take hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. And I'm like, how much water do you think it costs to drink the Diet Pepsi or the Diet Coke that you had today? How much water do you really think you use in taking a shower? Like, people don't realize in context all of these things. And, especially New Jersey, we like to say every single year we're in a drought. I mean, are we? I don't know. But, the scientists will say that we're in a drought every single summer between like mid-June through August, and that it'll just miraculously disappear. But, we're seeing especially with AI, the benefits in the technological advancements in this, especially regarding around water. I know that we're looking at in New Jersey, they're trying to build one that would have recycled a lot of its water. I mean, are you starting to see that's being more common now, or is that becoming, or is that actually old technology and we're seeing new?
Yeah, so the industry's definitely been improving on this score, and they've got a lot of incentive to do so, both monetarily, but also from a PR standpoint, right? Like they don't want all these people knocking on their doors and shutting them down and all this kind of stuff too. And I both hope and expect continued improvements. There's been a shift to like the closed loop water systems you might hear about. So basically there's an initial intake of water. Again, an important, thing to consider in the process, but it's just an initial intake. And then that's essentially recycled and reused to keep the supercomputers cooled. More efficient server technology, improved facility designs to maximize natural cooling processes. There's a direct to chip liquid cooling process I've been learning some more about. And who knows what the future might hold. I'm sure AI might actually help us unlock some other options that we haven't even considered yet. Physics obviously places a limit on what is possible there, but improvements have occurred and will continue to do so.
Awesome. Well, I do want to shift it over. New Jersey is one of the most densely populated states in the country. We are the third smallest state, I believe, in the country as well. Land is always an issue in New Jersey. We have 3 feet of 3 feet left of, I guess, green. It's kind of like where Tyler and I live, and then South Jersey where the Pine Barrens are. And so, we have a bit of a pressure on the land, and so much so like where last year that there are towns that are trying to put eminent domain on affordable housing in a 175-year-old farm. I don't know if you saw it. It went national news, I know. But, towns are really they're being mandated with these different things, and they're trying to, consolidate land and stuff.
Sure.
Do data centers really take up a lot of land? Because I see that all the time on social media, like, we're not destroying this farmland for this data center. Or can you really zone them in other areas too?
Sure. I mean, I guess if I've learned anything from the great Thomas Sowell, it's that there's trade-offs to everything. So if you use a plot of land for one thing, that plot of land cannot be used for another thing, and this would be true for housing, for railroads, for schools, et cetera. So if you do build a data center somewhere, you can't grow cranberries there, for instance. But I think the best way to resolve this is through property rights. For instance, if I owned a family farm and some data center developer was willing to give me 2 times, 5 times, 10 times the value I could get on the market for my land, I'd listen to the offer. I'd probably take the money, buy another plot of land somewhere, and start the family farm up anew with a few $1 million in my pocket to boot, so I can keep the family farm running for generations to come. And I think, it seems to go hand in hand with that question is that, it takes up this land and resources, and we don't get anything back in return. But every time a farmer uses precision agriculture tools to improve crop yields or be more efficient with their water use or reduce their need for pesticides, all of those things run on a data center. Every time the doctor pulls up your medical records and helps you live a healthier life, they're using a data center. Every time you FaceTime with grandma, you use your credit card online or ask an AI tool to tell you if that plant your kid just tried to eat is poison ivy, you're using a data center. We have some other great examples of how AI specifically, so in relation to the data centers, is helping make the world a better place on those scores. You could look up aiopportunities.org to learn more. And I mentioned this before, but they also provide millions of dollars in tax revenue for local and state governments. We're building another tool. You can actually pull this up and look it up. We're building it right now. It's called datacenteraatlas.org. If you want to get a sense of the property tax revenue that'd be collected, how many jobs would likely be created, how much water and energy use would be used if a data center was built in your county. We currently only have a couple of states, interactive map, but we're going to build out the rest of them, and we've got a bunch of other information there for people to learn more if they want.
Interesting. So I know at least in Zach and I's neck of the woods up in Sussex County, we're seeing quite a few municipalities push data center bans. So I guess my question would be if a data center project came before your council, what specific assurances or would you make for the power costs and utility impact?
Sure. If one was coming to a place where I had a say over it, I'd be encouraged and excited. I completely understand politicians wanting to get something from them, but if I was waving my magic wand and could pick locations, I'd target abandoned industrial areas, right, where you've already got some infrastructure built out that you can tap into. Maybe you can maybe there was a closed natural gas plant. You could bring that back online. In Connecticut, there's the Millstone nuclear plant where Unit 1 was closed years ago. You could bring that back online and do a data center build out there. So it's like a win-win where you're going to generate more energy than is needed by the data center, which is also a very stable demand user of energy, which grid operators like and appreciate, and they can actually spread out transmission costs across a greater use kit base because of the data center build out. I think I would try to pair it with small modular reactor build out if I was, if I had my wits about it. The U.S. military is planning on doing SMR deployment at scale at bases, just like our nuclear submarine fleet that's been operational for decades. And I think data centers could help us build that out because they want to get to capacity at speed, and so they're willing the money. They're willing to invest some money in this. So maybe we can invest it in a way that's going to do long-term energy generation that benefits you and I.
Awesome. Bryce, I know that going to the policy side of things now, a lot of states haven't really regulated necessarily, or they have, but no one really has a kind of like a uniform structure of what good policy would look like on whether state or county or local level. If you could do some policy recommendations for the state of New Jersey, what would be some of those be?
Oh gosh. I would, if I was a local official and I was looking for, what have other people been doing? I'd look at the folks at Loudoun County. I'd go read their reports. I'd understand, how much property tax revenue has come in. I'd understand, how they're, what's an effective way for siting and location, perhaps a specific design build will have some sort of noise generation. So we should have like a setback requirement for it or something. Like there's reasonable things to consider there, but I'd start from the premise of, I want to say yes to this, and I want to figure out how to get to yes. I want to do it in a way that, my community is going to be happy with that decision too, both today and, in the years ahead. So I think I would look to local officials where examples exist. I think I keep thinking of Loudoun County as a specific example. I think it's something in the area of 50%. I want to say of the county's revenue is from data centers now. Their property tax burden is 25% less than neighboring jurisdictions. I try to find a way that I could fund schools without having to break the backs of my residents.
That's definitely great. That I obviously myself being a lobbyist and governmental affairs agent with Jersey First, we've been seeing some some policy recommendations for microgrids. I was wondering if you had any, any thoughts on those and to data centers.
Absolutely. I think microgrids are a positive solution, consumer regulated energy. Any way that improves and streamlines a permitting process that gets people to say yes. Like we shouldn't be unnecessarily bogging people's time down with bureaucrats deciding yes or no. Let's streamline and bring transparency to the permitting process. Let's think about energy generation as hand in hand with prosperity, and let's build.
No, certainly. I mean, I know you mentioned Connecticut having, you guys closed down a plant. New Jersey's also closed down our own Oyster Creek down in South Jersey.
That's right.
And I know across the river into PA with us, Microsoft put one of their data centers in 3 Mile Island. So it's how do we reinvest into our, previous infrastructure, and how do we make these connections as a whole? I think it's going to be some of the biggest issues that, our generation is going to have, even coming 30, 40 years down the line. Especially when it comes to the right policy. Well, what is that right policy? And so I think, even Tyler, I'm sure Tyler agree with me on this, of we want to have the right balance of where we're not, having ratepayers increase more, but we also don't want to be the Luddites and not be like, oh my gosh, we don't want new technological advancements,
Yep.
And it's a very difficult balance, I definitely would say.
Yep. Trade-offs to everything.
Yeah. And then, so real quick, before we jump off and do the other things, can you just describe to the listeners kind of like what a microgrid is, and possibly how that kind of would possibly connect to using maybe an SMR with it, and kind of the relationship of those three, if possible?
Yeah. I mean, the way I think of them, it's essentially something that operates outside of, say, your monopoly regulated utility, that is just all about getting something in a local area built and operational that powers maybe a factory, maybe it powers a homeowners association, maybe, whatever it might be. I think there's lots of different iterations of this. I've listened to, one of our fellows, Travis Fisher, has written a lot about this. I turned to I would look him up and turn to his resources for, better understanding of how these can work. My former colleague, Josh Smith, who's now over at the Pacific Legal Foundation, has written on these things too. The good folks at the R Street Institute, Competitive Enterprise Institute page over there. A lot of people have done a lot of great work on those topics, and yeah, they are definitely a value add. They're, maybe they're not the solution for everywhere all the time, but they are definitely a positive growth component.
Awesome. Well, Bryce, how can our listeners find out more, either from the Abundance Institute or even from yourself?
Yeah, look us up online, abundance.institute. We've got some great YouTube videos. You can email me whenever you want, bryce@abundance.institute. We're on Twitter. If you talked about earlier about Facebook comments, if you want to get called names online, say you think data centers are maybe okay. That's a good way to get called a lot of names. But I think it's good to fight that good fight, because I think we're on the side that's going to lead to more prosperity for you and I.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bryce, for joining us on this week of Bridging the Gap. And everyone, make sure you subscribe, share with your local actually elected officials on this one, and tune into our next episode in 2 weeks.